Abortion rights are a big issue on the minds of Super Tuesday voters. And while the Democratic presidential candidates on the ballot all agree on abortion, recent polling shows the general public still remains divided on the issue.
According to a recent Pew study, 61% of people say it should be legal in all or most cases, while 38% say it should be illegal. CBS News reporter Kate Smith joins us now with more on this discussion from Washington. So, Kate, this is an especially important issue with the Supreme Court set to hear arguments tomorrow on its first abortion cases since the appointments of two conservative justices, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. Where does the Democratic base stand on this issue?
The Democratic Party is the party for enhancing abortion access and reproductive rights right now. And it's certainly an issue that the presidential candidates have rallied around on both sides of the issue. So you've seen every presidential Democratic candidate leaning into improving abortion access, improving reproductive health. And on the other side of the aisle, you have seen President Trump also, going towards his evangelical base, his Catholic base, and telling him that he is the president to eliminate abortion. He often brings up, abortions that happen later in a woman's pregnancy, which is something that base really wants to hear about. It's an issue that they want to vote on. But right now, the Democratic Party is monolith on their ability to try to improve abortion access and then also just improve reproductive health in this country.
According to the Pew study, 17% of Democrats oppose legal abortion. That's a significant number. How do these voters feel about their party's stance on the issue?
So here's, I think, where it gets so interesting. When we're looking things from a top-level political view, abortion access and reproductive rights feels very, along party lines. But when you dig into some of the polling, it really doesn't appear that way. So like you mentioned, nearly 20% of Democrats actually don't believe abortion should be legal. And then on the other side of that, a third of Republicans believe that abortion should be legal. So when you're looking at real people in real places and not just politics in D.C., you see that the abortion debate is much more complicated than it appears. Last week, I had the opportunity to speak to several Democratic anti-abortion voters, and they were saying they're just simply not comfortable with any of the candidates that exist in the field right now.
I mean, do any of the candidates differ in any way when it comes to abortion rights?
Right now, not really. So when you're looking at the front runners for the Democratic presidential candidate, all of them are very monolith on how they view abortion access. They believe that we should be codifying Roe v. Wade. They believe that we should be appointing justices to make sure, that abortion access remains legal. But the big thing to point out here is the Hyde Amendment. Now, that is an amendment, a D.C. federal thing that basically prohibits federal dollars from funding abortion care. Now, why this is so important is that right now, federal dollars can't fund abortion care. It's been that way for nearly 40 years. But the idea is that all of these presidential candidates want to repeal that. Now, if you are a Democrat anti-abortion voter, what they told me is that they were comfortable with safe, legal, and rare. They're comfortable with, the majority of their party disagreeing with them. But where they draw the line are their tax dollars funding abortion. So it'll be really interesting how these voters kind of view the, smaller field of candidates that we're going into right now.
Of the states holding contests on Super Tuesday, 3 passed abortion bans in 2019: Alabama, Arkansas, and Tennessee. How is this issue playing out on the ground there?
So I think that's certainly where it's going to get really interesting. So many of the early primary states and caucus states are states that historically support abortion access. But like you mentioned, for Super Tuesday, you're looking at states that don't. And, it would seem to make sense that many of these anti-abortion Democrats exist in these states. Texas has historically been a very hostile state towards abortion rights. So it'll be really interesting to understand where these voters are coming from and how they feel about these very progressive and very bold stances on abortion access that you're hearing from these candidates. Take Louisiana, for example, not in Super Tuesday, but one of their most, well-known anti-abortion restrictions actually authored by a anti-abortion Democrat. So these people exist, they're passing laws, and they have a lot of support from their base.
Can you just remind the audience about the significance of tomorrow's Supreme Court hearing?
So tomorrow, the Supreme Court will hear its very first abortion-related case since the conservative appointments of Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. Why this is so important is because the Supreme Court right now has historically ruled to protect abortion access, to support Roe v. Wade, but we don't know how these two new conservative justices will feel about this. And I think it's really important to note exactly what this case is about. It's about an anti-abortion restriction out of Louisiana. It basically regulates how doctors who provide abortions, can deliver that care and the regulations that they need to do in order to do that. But the problem is that, first of all, you've already seen an exact same regulation ruled on by the Supreme Court not 4 years ago in Whole Women's Health. And then additionally, the impact would not just be Louisiana. This would have national implications. I was speaking to people at Planned Parenthood, at the Center for Reproductive Rights, and they keep reiterating that if the Supreme Court were to uphold the state law at the center of tomorrow's case, you would truly see kind of a decimation, in their words, of abortion access in this country. And what they keep saying is that even though this wouldn't directly overturn Roe v. Wade, it would effectively erode it to the point that it doesn't matter anymore.
All right, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate.